The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. The bank manager's skin turned completely white. His hands were shaking as he grabbed the telephone. "Shut the main doors," he instructed his helper, "and get the police on the phone immediately." He stared at me as if I had handed him a live explosive instead of my late grandfather's old savings book. The small booklet rested quietly on his desk, its cover faded and soft with age. It looked ordinary, harmless, but the reaction in the room made it clear that the object was anything but ordinary. This was the same book my mother tossed in the trash only yesterday. She called it a piece of garbage that should have been buried with him. She was convinced it had no value. It turns out that some mysteries refuse to stay in the ground, and some of them have sharp teeth. My name is Megan, and I have found out that the truth is very patient. Leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from and what the current time is for you. I really want to see who is in our group. When the sirens started screaming outside the glass doors of Bayside Bank, I didn't move even an inch. Most people in that situation would have panicked immediately. Their voices would shake. They would stumble over their explanations or nervously look toward the security guard who had just stepped closer, standing only a few feet away. But I stayed calm. I remained seated in the tall leather chair and glanced at my watch as if this was just another scheduled appointment. My work requires accuracy. As a civil engineer, my daily life is built around stress loads, structural limits, and exact measurements. When you design buildings, you learn quickly that ignoring the numbers means disaster. If the math is wrong, the entire structure collapses. My family never respected the math. They preferred the appearance of strength, while the foundation beneath their lives slowly turned into soft sand. When the police officers stepped into the bank searching for the reason behind the emergency call, I didn't wait for their questions. Instead, I opened my professional leather bag and calmly placed a carefully organized stack of documents on the manager's desk. Everything was prepared in advance. My identification, my grandfather's death certificate, a certified copy of his final will. That document clearly stated that I was the sole person responsible for his estate. My mother had already attempted to outmaneuver the truth. She had shown the court a fake power of attorney and an outdated version of the will. Her goal was simple: gain control before anyone noticed the real paperwork, but I came prepared. Along with the documents, I had a forensic reproduction of the savings book that my grandfather kept hidden inside the secret compartment of his handmade clock box. Arthur, the bank manager, was still visibly trembling. His eyes moved back and forth between me and the police officers as if he was trying to piece together a puzzle that had suddenly become dangerous. I could see the moment his expression changed. He realized this was not a grieving granddaughter asking for spending money. This was an investigation, and the bank had become the location of a financial crime. I quietly activated the recording application on my phone and placed it face up on the desk. "Let us be completely honest," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "The police are not here because I broke any laws." I paused briefly before finishing. "They're here because this account has been flagged for fraud for 10 years. Arthur swallowed. "More specifically," I continued, "it was flagged after my mother attempted to forge my grandfather's signature in order to steal the entire balance while he was still alive." Arthur inhaled slowly and looked toward the lead officer. After a long second, he nodded. "The account was flagged," he admitted. He explained that back in 2015, a woman who claimed to have legal power of attorney attempted to transfer $3,500,000 to a construction company that did not actually exist. The signature had been close, about 80% accurate, but the bank's security system noticed inconsistencies in the writing pattern. The transfer was blocked. Before the bank could start a full investigation, the woman disappeared. I did not cry hearing that story. I did not ask why it happened. The truth was already clear to me. My own mother had been willing to steal from a man lying on his deathbed. In our family, love functioned like a paid subscription, and I had stopped paying that bill a long time ago. I simply pointed toward the visitor logbook on the counter. "My mother and my brother are at my grandfather's house right now," I told the officers calmly. "They're selling his furniture before he's even buried." I leaned forward slightly and my shadow stretched across the desk. "They think I'm weak," I said. "They think I'm just a girl who draws lines on paper." My hand rested on the savings book. "But engineers pay attention," I continued quietly. We notice when the foundation begins to rot. I tapped the booklet once. And today I'm here to recover the $4,200,000 my grandfather saved to protect me from people exactly like them. I looked at the officers directly. This isn't a family disagreement. This is a final audit, and I brought every receipt. The air at the big waterfront house did not smell like a fresh morning. It carried the scent of ocean salt, strong perfume, and the heavy aroma of the catered food my mother had ordered for the wake. My mother stood near the wooden buffet table, speaking loudly with a group of property developers. Even though my grandfather had just passed away, to her, the day wasn't about mourning. It was about opportunity. I remember the moment very clearly. I was holding the final architectural plan my grandfather had given me 2 weeks before he died. It was a beautiful design for a coastal home. He had spent years perfecting it. It was meant to be his final gift to me. My mother walked toward me and pulled the delicate paper from my hands. She barely glanced at it. "This is useless nonsense, Megan," she said coldly. Robert wasn't thinking clearly near the end. He turned into a dreamer and forgot how numbers work before I could react. She walked into his office and fed the drawings straight into the paper shredder. Thin strips of white paper fell into the container like snow. "Stop being so emotional," she told me. "Go sit with the cousins." So I sat quietly in the back of the room and watched my brother entertain a group of wealthy investors. He proudly talked about the $1,400,000 my mother had given him for his new investment company. The money came from selling my grandfather's house and his vintage cars. She had emptied the estate just to rescue my brother from his mistakes. What everyone really knew, but nobody said out loud, was that it wasn't an investment, it was gambling debt. While all of that was happening, I had worked 3 separate jobs to pay for my engineering degree. I had no choice. My mother always told me there was no extra money to support my little drawing hobby. I didn't shout. I didn't try to gather the shredded pieces of my grandfather's plan. To my family, I was just the quiet girl who accepted whatever scraps she was given, but they misunderstood my silence. It wasn't obedience, it was survival. I grew up in a home that looked strong from the outside, but inside it was built on unstable ground. For 31 years, I carried the emotional weight of their version of family. Every time I showed strength, my mother treated it like a flaw that needed to be corrected. Living there felt like being a building with deep cracks hidden inside its foundation. You remain perfectly still, not because you are weak, but because you fear that one small movement will cause the entire roof to collapse. My silence wasn't a breakdown. It was the quiet patience of someone waiting for the walls made of lies to finally collapse. As I watched them pick through my grandfather's belongings like hungry birds, I realized something important. They had drained my kindness for far too long. The foundation was ready to fail. And I was the only one who knew exactly where the switch was that could destroy everything. The digital chaos arrived even faster than the real one. My phone vibrated constantly with notifications, its screen glowing with a cold blue light. Destroying my grandfather's memory wasn't enough for them. They wanted to destroy my reputation too. I sat in my dark kitchen when a photo appeared on my social media feed. My mother and my brother were sitting inside a luxurious 5-star steakhouse in Portland. They were raising champagne glasses together in celebration. The bottle probably cost more than my monthly rent. The caption read, "Celebrating a new era for the family company." Sometimes you have to remove dead weight to reach the stars. They didn't even wait for the funeral flowers to wilt before turning me into their villain. A few minutes later, a direct message arrived. From my mother, Megan, the lawyers already explained everything. "You're not on the main accounts because you never contributed anything to this family. I'm sending $450 to your bank account for gas. Take it and move on. Stop embarrassing us with your research. And your ridiculous questions. Just let it go, $450. That was the value they assigned to 31 years of my life, $450, while they quietly emptied millions from a dead man's savings. I didn't cry. I didn't send an emotional message. I didn't ask why. I rubbed my eyes, expecting to feel sadness, but instead I felt something else. Clarity. This wasn't a family falling apart. It was a financial spreadsheet, and I had finally reached the final line of the calculation. I did not reply to any of the messages. Instead, I opened my computer and started a new locked spreadsheet. If my mother wanted to act like a mean builder, she should have remembered that I am a professional engineer. I know exactly how a building falls down. I knew which big lies were holding up their rich lifestyle. By 1:00 in the morning, I was not just the daughter everyone ignored. I was the main investigator in my own secret fight. I called an old friend who now ran a small company that does forensic checking of money. I did not tell him a story. I gave him a job. I need every building permit, every bank transfer, and every fake signature my mother ever wrote on a piece of paper. I told him my kindness was a luxury for them. They have spent way too much for years, and tonight I am cutting off their credit. I spent the rest of the night finding their weak spots. While they were celebrating at an expensive restaurant, I was busy doing the math on the evidence that was going to destroy their world. They were not surprised by what they did. They were surprised that I stopped doing what they wanted. Inside, my computer screen was glowing with a different kind of morning light, the kind made of numbers, facts, and quiet payback. I went back to the house by the water while a thick fog covered the whole coast. The house felt empty without my grandfather, but I was not there to be sad. I was there for the main plan. I walked past the room where my mother had destroyed my grandfather's final building drawing. My feet were silent on the wood floors. I was going to the clock box, a huge and complicated machine my grandfather spent 30 years making. To my mother, it was just a piece of junk that did not work. To an engineer, it was a work of art with hidden wheels and exact tension. I pushed the brass handles in the order my grandfather taught me when I was only 10 years old. The box made a noise as the inside locks opened perfectly and a secret drawer at the bottom slid out. Inside, there were no more drawings. There was a black leather book and one last letter that was written only for me. As I read his words, I felt like I could not breathe. My grandfather was not a confused old man in his last years. He was a man stuck in a jail he made himself. It was the jail of a father who loves a daughter but knows she is bad deep down. I realized then that my grandfather's silence was not because he was weak. It was a quiet and painful feeling of regret. He had spent 10 years like a watcher, looking from the corner as my mother tore his work apart piece by piece. He was torn between hoping his daughter would choose to be nice and the cold, hard proof that she never would. He wrote that his cancer was his final clock. The moment he knew he had to stop being a dad and start being a judge, he wrote down every stolen dollar and every fake building permit in that book. He was waiting for the one person he knew would be smart enough to finish the task. I took the book to my money expert that same night. We sat in a room that smelled like old coffee and cold facts. This was not about getting even. It was a money audit. 2 hours later, the expert looked up at me with a very serious face. "Megan, it is much worse than the bank papers showed." He said, "Your mother did not just take money. She made a fake company called Shoreline Structures LLC. Over the last 5 years, she moved $1,400,000 through that fake company to pay for your brother's gambling debts and people he owed money to. The final blow came at 3:00 in the morning. We found the digital copies of the papers used to take out the money. The signature at the bottom was a very bad, heavy copy of my grandfather's name. As a civil engineer, I have spent my whole life looking at how my grandfather wrote on thousands of building plans. I knew every turn of his big R and every lean of his small t. The signature on these bank papers was a structural error. It was a lie that could not hold its own weight. My mother and my brother were not just mean, they were criminals. They had built their expensive life on a base of serious fraud, and I now had the main key to pull the whole thing down. I was calm. I had the facts, and it was going to be deadly for them. The groundbreaking event for the Horizon Peak development was a huge display of ego. My mother had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a heated tent, glass chandeliers, and a guest list filled with the most important political and financial people in the state. She stood on a temporary stage with a silver-plated shovel in her hand. She was beaming as she talked about a luxury future built on a $2,900,000 foundation of stolen money. Next to her, my brother fixed his silk tie. He looked like the prince of a kingdom he had never worked a day for. I did not wait for an invite. I walked through the middle of the crowd, and the rhythmic sound of my professional heels on the floor cut through the soft jazz music. I was not alone. Behind me were 4 men in dark suits. They were federal marshals who had spent the last 48 hours looking at my locked spreadsheet and the book from my grandfather's clock box. Their search had gone beyond family theft. It was now about interstate money laundering and tax crimes through my brother's fake companies. This was a federal arrest. My mother saw me and her smile did not just go away, it turned sour. She stepped off the stage and spoke in a low voice meant only for me. Megan, you pathetic dreamer, get out. You are making the family look stupid. I told you to take the gas money and disappear. I looked at her. I am not here as your daughter, Valerie, I said. My voice was very professional and steady. It sounded across the quiet room like a report about a building failing. I am here as the person in charge of Robert's estate, and I am here to tell you that the inspection is finished. I handed her the money audit. As she looked through the proof of the $1,400,000 moved through Shoreline Structures, her hands started to shake. The woman who was so arrogant just a moment ago fell to her knees in her expensive dress. Her face was a mask of fear. Megan, please, she whispered. Her eyes were red as she looked at the cameras. We are family. Think of your brother's future. We can fix this in private. We can give you a place in the business. I looked down at her and felt nothing but the cold truth of a finished math sheet. You do not understand, Mother. I stopped being family the moment you put my grandfather's life's work into a paper shredder. I watched the people in the crowd move away from her. The room became very silent. This was the truth of her world. My mother's power was never a strong wall, it was just a rental. Her power, her status, and her social spot were all a costume paid for with a dying man's savings. Without the stolen millions, there was no base. There was only a small, scared woman holding a silver shovel she did not own. She had cared so much about having money that she forgot how to be a person of character. Take them, the head marshal said. The sound of the handcuffs locking around my mother's wrists was the most exact sound I had ever heard. As they took her and my brother out past the shocked investors, I did not look back. I did not have to. The wall of their lies had finally broken at the stress point, and it was time for a new builder to take over. 6 months have passed since the day my mother's world reached its breaking point and finally fell apart. The news stories about the arrests are gone. They are replaced by cold court papers showing every dollar they took from a dying man's life savings. I am standing on the porch of the big house by the water. I am watching the sun come up over the ocean in shades of purple and gold. The house does not smell like bad food or the heavy scent of fake acting anymore. It smells like cedar, salt air, and the fresh ink on new building plans. I have officially changed this house into Designer Sanctuary. It is a nonprofit studio for students who do not have money and were told their ideas were garbage. We give them what they need. My mother refused to give me a solid base, so I am giving it to them. The large amount of money my grandfather hid in that old book now pays for students who have talent but no money. My mother and brother are in federal prison right now. My mother still sends letters on yellow paper. They are long messages full of blame and talk about being loyal to the family. I do not write back. I have learned that some doors need to stay locked to keep the building safe. My brother's business has been closed to pay back the $1,400,000 they moved. His name is now just a bad story for people who used to give him money. I go into the office and sit at my grandfather's desk. The clock box is in the middle. The wheels are clean and the secret spots are empty. I touch the wood and realize this was my grandfather's best design. He did not just leave me cash. He gave me a test that made me see I was never a burden. I was the only one in the family who cared about the math. I was the only one who knew you cannot build a life on lies and expect it to stay up. I have found peace here that is not about status or silver shovels. It is the quiet peace of a job done the right way. My grandfather was right. The truth is patient. It can wait longer than any lie, and in the end, it is the only thing that can hold the weight. Real legacy is not about the money you get. It is about stopping the cycle of being mean. If you have ever found the power to walk away from a bad situation and build your own life, share your story below. Do not forget to follow for more stories about justice.